Have you ever considered that the deepest wounds, the ones that shape a soul forever, are not the ones earned in the heat of battle? What if the most dangerous enemy isn't the one across the border but the one who wears the same uniform, sleeps under the same roof and smiles while they hand you your damnation? In a place built on the pillars of honor, discipline, and courage, the Pakistan Army, what happens when a single, almost invisible mark on a young woman's hand, a tiny, perfect circle of burnt flesh, threatens to bring the entire fortress of silence crashing down? Is it just a scar from a training mishap, as everyone claims? Or is it a brand, a silent scream from a living hell, hidden in plain sight, a hell where the defendants of our nation have become the prey? The story you are about to hear is not one of grandeur or glory. It is a quiet story, a story of buried secrets and the suffocating weight of fear. It will make you question everything you thought you knew about strength and weakness. The letter was not official. It bore no stamp, no signature, no service number. It was just a single, crumpled piece of paper, folded so many times its creases were soft as cloth. It had found its way to Brigadier Saif not through official channels but through a chain of whispers, passed from one old comrade to another, a ghost navigating the rigid arteries of the military system. Brigadier Saif, a man whose career was as long and unblemished as the mountain snows, was just 3 months from retirement. He was a man of books now, of procedure, of quiet reflection. He had thought his days of hunting for the truth in the darkest corners were long behind him. But this note, it felt different. It was desperate. It spoke of a shadow in the women's wing of the cantonment, a prestigious training academy nestled high in the remote, unforgiving mountains of the north. The note used words like suffocation, silent tears, and the marble doll's judgment. It ended with a single, desperate plea, help us. Room 203 was a symbol of excellence. Its graduates were the pride of the nation. It was a place of breathtaking beauty and brutal discipline, where the thin, crisp air was supposed to forge the finest officers. The idea of a rat, a decay festering within its hallowed halls, seemed impossible. An insult. Yet, the note felt like a splinter in the brigadier's mind, and he knew he could not retire with this ghost haunting him. So, he arranged a surprise welfare and readiness inspection. He didn't inform the base commandant of his true purpose. He simply arrived, his presence casting a long, quiet shadow over the perfectly manicured parade grounds. The cantonment buzzed with a nervous energy. A brigadier from GHQ, unannounced. It was unheard of. He was met by the base adjutant, a stiff young major, and the head of the women's wing, Captain Zara. She was everything a modern army officer was supposed to be. Impeccably dressed, her posture ramrod straight, her hair pulled back in a severe, tight bun. Her face was strikingly beautiful, but it was a cold beauty, like a statue carved from flawless, white marble. The cadets, he knew, called her the marble doll. Looking at her, he understood why. There was no warmth in her eyes. Only a sharp, calculating intelligence. Brigadier, sir. An unexpected honor, she said, her voice as crisp and sterile as the mountain air. Block D is, as always, at your complete disposal. The girls are exemplary. You will find their discipline second to none. Brigadier Saif offered a polite, non-committal nod. I am sure I will, Captain. I'd like to begin with A. Unaccompanied, if you don't mind. I prefer to get a natural feel for the environment. A flicker of something announced crossed Captain's face, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of professional courtesy. Of course, sir. As you wish. As he walked down the long, disinfected corridors of Block D, the women's accommodation wing, a strange quiet fell over the place. He saw cadets snapping to attention, their faces blank, their eyes fixed forward. He heard the rhythmic stamp of boots, the creak of polished leather. It was perfect. Too perfect. It felt rehearsed. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Suffocating. It was the silence of fear. He passed room after room. 201, 202. He paused outside room 203. The number from the note. He could feel the eyes of Captain watching him from the end of the corridor. He raised his hand and knocked a gentle and assuming rap on the wood. The sound seemed to echo in the cavernous silence. The door opened a few inches. A young woman's face appeared in the gap. She was small, with large, frightened eyes that seemed to swallow her face. Her name tag read, Jabeen, H. Sipo Hina Jabeen, he asked, his voice soft. Sir, she whispered, her body rigid with tension. May I come in for a moment? He asked, not as a command but as a question. I am just speaking with a few of the cadets. A simple welfare check. She hesitated, her eyes darting nervously down the hall, likely towards the unseen presence of Captain. Then, with a resigned sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, she opened the door wider and stepped back. As Brigadier Saif crossed the threshold into room 203, he felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. He had just stepped out of the cold, sterile hallway and into the heart of the storm. The room was Spartan, meticulously clean. 2 beds, 2 steel trunks, 2 perfectly folded uniforms laid out for the next day. Everything was in its place. It was a room that revealed nothing, a space wiped clean of any personality. Hina Jabeen stood by her bed, her hands clasped tightly behind her back, her gaze fixed on a point on the floor. Her roommate was out, on duty. They were alone. Please, Sipo, relax, Brigadier Saif said, his voice gentle. He gestured to the simple wooden chair by a small desk. Let's just talk. He didn't sit down himself. Instead, he walked over to the small window, looking out at the jagged peaks that encircled the cantonment. It's beautiful here, he murmured, more to himself than to her. A person could feel very close to God or very, very alone. He turned back to her. Which is it for you, Hina? The question seemed to startle her. It wasn't a standard inspection question. It was personal. Sir, she stammered. Your home. Where is it? He pressed, keeping his tone conversational. Sialkot, sir. A small village outside the city. Ah, Sialkot, he smiled faintly. The land of poets and sportsmen. A proud land. Your parents must be very proud of you. A daughter in the Pakistan army. At the mention of her parents, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed her face. A deep, profound sadness. Yes, sir. They are. Good. That's good. He walked slowly towards her. He noticed a glass of water on her bedside table. You were thirsty. He picked it up to hand it to her. As she reached out to take it, her sleeve pulled back just a fraction of an inch. And he saw it. A sliver of white. A bandage wrapped tightly around the back of her right hand. It was the way she moved that caught his attention. A wince. An almost imperceptible flinch as she took the glass, her fingers trembling slightly. Her eyes immediately darted down to her own hand, a flash of pure panic in them. She quickly pulled her sleeve down to cover it. He pretended not to have noticed her panic, but his mind was racing. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Something happened to your hand, he asked, his voice still calm, almost casual. It's nothing, sir, she said, her voice suddenly thin and reedy. A training accident. On the obstacle course. A rope burn. It was a plausible lie. A perfect lie. But her delivery was flawed. Her heart was pounding so hard he felt he could almost see the frantic pulse in her neck. Her eyes refused to meet his. She was staring at the floor as if her life depended on it. Brigadier Saif took a step closer. He was no longer a retiring officer making small talk. He was the man who had rooted out corruption in Waziristan, the investigator who had entangled spy rings in Karachi. He recognized the smell of a lie and the deeper, more pungent smell of terror that accompanied it. A rope burn, he repeated softly. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so it was barely a whisper. Hina, look at me. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were swimming with anxious tears. Fear, pure and undiluted, radiated from her. Let me see it, he said. It was not a request this time. It was a quiet command, layered with an authority that she could not refuse. Her breath hitched. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. Her left hand moved as if in a trance, slow and trembling, towards her right. Her fingers fumbled with the edge of the bandage. It seemed to take an eternity. The only sound in the room was the rasp of the adhesive tape being pulled away, and Hina's shaky, shallow breathing. She unwrapped the gauze, layer by agonizing layer, until the skin beneath was exposed. And Brigadier Saif felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. It was not a rope burn. A rope burn is jagged, angry, an abrasion. This was something else entirely. There, on the back of her delicate hand, was a perfect, dark, circular scar. It was deep, the edges enervingly precise. It looked less like an accident and more like a brand. A sigil. A mark of ownership. He looked from the scar to her terrified face. The pieces began to click into place. The anonymous note. The suffocating silence. The marble doll's judgment. He finally understood. This wasn't a case of poor discipline. This was a kingdom of pain, ruled by a tyrant, hidden within the very institution he had given his life to. Who did this to you, Hina? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The fortress of silence had just shown him its first crack. And he was about to smash it into a million pieces. Hina stared at the scar on her hand as if it were a venomous snake. Her entire body was trembling. The brigadier's question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. To answer it was to betray the unspoken law of Block D: you see nothing, you hear nothing, you say nothing. To remain silent was to condemn herself and others to continue living in this quiet hell. It was an accident, sir, she whispered again, the words hollow, devoid of any conviction. It was a prayer, not a statement. A desperate hope that he would accept the lie and leave. Brigadier Saif did not raise his voice. He did not get angry. He did something far more effective. He pulled the simple wooden chair from the desk, turned it around, and sat down, so he was at her eye level. He was no longer a towering figure of authority, but a man, an elder, looking at a child in pain. Hina, he said, his voice imbued with a deep, paternal gentleness. I have been a soldier for 40 years. I have seen bullet wounds. I have seen shrapnel wounds. I have seen every kind of injury a human body can sustain in training and in war. I know what a rope burn looks like. And I know what a burn from a piece of hot metal looks like. He paused, letting his words sink in. He could see the conflict warring in her eyes. The terror of speaking versus the agony of silence. I am not here to get you in trouble, he continued softly. I am not here to write a report that will end your career. I am here because someone who is very worried about the women in this block asked me for help. I am here because my job, my only job, is to protect my soldiers. That includes protecting them from their own. He reached out, not to touch her, but gesturing towards her branded hand. That is not a mark of training, Hina. That is a mark of something else. Something that has no place in this army. Something that is a stain on the uniform we both wear. Her dam of composure finally broke. A choked sob escaped her lips, and then another. The tears she had been holding back for weeks, for months, began to fall freely. She sank onto her bed, her body racked with silent sobs. The brigadier waited patiently, letting her grief pour out. The room was filled with the sound of her pain, a sound that had been suppressed for far too long. After a few minutes, her sobs subsided into ragged breaths. She didn't look at him, but she began to speak, her voice a raw, broken whisper. It's for discipline, she said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. When you make a mistake, a small one. If your boots aren't polished to her standard, if you are a second too slow on a drill, if your answer in class is not perfect. Her, the brigadier prompted gently. Hina flinched, as if just saying the name was a transgression. Captain Zara, sir. She calls it forging. She says the army is too soft now. She says she is forging us into steel. Burning away the impurities. The brigadier's blood ran cold. Forging. The word was so clinical, so perverse. How? He asked, his voice tight. Hina swallowed hard. She has a thing. In her office. It's an old regiment button, from her father's uniform, she said. It's mounted on a small wooden hand. She heats it with a lighter. Until it glows. Then she calls you in. And she tells you to hold out your hand. Hina's voice broke. She presses it into your skin. Just for a second. She says, let this be a reminder of the price of imperfection. He looked at the perfectly circular scar on Hina's hand. It matched the description of a uniform button. It was a deliberate, calculated act of torture, disguised as discipline. And the others, he asked. The note mentioned room 203. It said us. Hina nodded, wiping her tears with her free hand. I am not the only one, sir. There are many. In 104. Fatima, my roommate. Nida in 312. We all have them. Some on their hands, some on their arms, where the uniform can hide it. We live in fear, sir. Every single day. It's not the pain, it's the waiting. Not knowing when it will be your turn. The way she looks at you, her eyes, they're like eyes. She enjoys it. She enjoys our fear. The brigadier sat back, the full, monstrous scope of the situation settling upon him. This wasn't just one abusive officer. This was a system of terror. Captain Zara hadn't just broken the rules, she had created her own, twisted version of them. She had built a culture of silence on the foundations of pain and psychological torment. The phrase from the note, the marble doll's judgment, now made perfect, horrifying sense. Why has no one spoken up before? He asked, though he already knew the answer. To who, sir? Hina asked, a hint of bitter irony in her voice. She is in charge of everything. Our leave, our promotions, our reports. She told us if anyone ever speaks a word of this outside block D, she would make sure we were discharged for psychiatric reasons. She said she would write a report that would bring such shame, such dishonor to our families that we would never recover. Who would believe us, a few lowly sepoys over a decorated captain with a perfect record? The concept of izzat, of honor. It was the most potent weapon in this country, and Zara was wielding it like a knife. Brigadier Saif stood up. His mind was clear now. The path ahead was fraught with danger. A direct accusation against a decorated captain, based on the word of a terrified young soldier, was a risky move. Zara would deny everything. She would have the full backing of the base command, who would be desperate to avoid a scandal. He needed more. He needed undeniable proof. Hina, he said, his voice now firm, still lacing the gentle tone. You have done the bravest thing you could possibly do today. You spoke the truth. Now, I need you to trust me. I will handle this. I give you my word as a soldier and as a man, this ends now. But I need your help. He looked at her, his eyes locking with hers. Your roommate Fatima. Does she trust you? Hina nodded slowly. Yes, sir. We are from the same district. Good, the brigadier said. I will be conducting interviews all afternoon. I will call her in. But I need something more. Something Zara cannot deny. Is there anything at all that is written down? Hina's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. It was a flicker of an idea, a sudden memory. She looked towards her steel trunk, then back at the brigadier, her mind racing. The risk was immense. But for the first time in a long time, a tiny, fragile spark of hope had been lit in the darkness of room 213. The game had changed. The prey were beginning to learn how to hunt. Brigadier Saif established a temporary office in a small, unused briefing room, a neutral space away from the prying eyes of the regular staff. He requested the personnel files for every cadet in Block D, a move that was procedural enough not to raise alarms but gave him the pretext he needed. He called in 3 other cadets, chosen at random, and asked them bland, routine questions about the food, the training schedule, their leave requests. They all gave the same robotic, perfect answers. The wall of silence was strong. They were. Then, he called for Sipo Fatima Chaudhry, Hina's roommate. Fatima entered the room with the same tense, guarded posture as the others. She was taller than Hina, with a steady gaze that seemed to mask a deep well of anxiety. She sat down, her back ramrod straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The brigadier started with the same gentle approach. He asked about her family, her ambitions. Fatima's answers were polite, but guarded. She gave nothing away. He then leaned forward slightly, his expression turning serious. Sipo, he said, his voice low. I am going to ask you a question. And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. I am not recording this conversation. It is just you and me. I want to know about the morale in Block D. The morale is excellent, sir, Fatima replied instantly, the answer too quick, too polished. Discipline is firm, but fair. Captain runs a very tight ship. Brigadier Saif held her gaze. A tight ship. I see. And are you happy here, Fatima? A beat of silence. I am proud to serve, sir. He could see the wall. It was made of solid fear. He decided to take a risk, to use the key Hina had given him. Your friend, Hina Jabeen, he said, watching her face carefully. She is a good soldier. But she seems burdened. I saw a scar on her hand. She said it was a training accident. Fatima's composure didn't break, but he saw a muscle twitch in her jaw. A tiny, involuntary reaction. Yes, sir. The obstacle course can be challenging. I see, the brigadier said, leaning back in his chair. He let the silence stretch, making it uncomfortable. He wasn't going to pressure her deeply. He was going to make her confront the lie herself. It's a strange thing, honor, he mused, as if thinking aloud. We think it's about having a perfect record. A clean slate. But sometimes true honor is about having the courage to clean a stain, not hide it. We are sworn to protect this country. But what about the soul of our army? Who protects that when we refuse to see the sickness within? He looked directly at Fatima, his eyes piercing. Captain is just one officer. The Pakistan Army is an institution that has stood for over 70 years. It has survived wars, turmoil, and strife. Do you really believe it is so fragile that the truth about one person could break it? Or do you think that by staying silent you are letting that sickness spread and fester until it poisons everything we stand for? Fatima's hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, were now clenched into tight fists. Her knuckles were white. He had struck a nerve. He had reframed the issue. It wasn't about loyalty to a captain anymore. It was about loyalty to the institution itself. I don't know what you mean, sir, she whispered, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. I think you do, the brigadier said softly. Hina has already shown her courage. The question is, will you show yours? That was the final push. The mention of Hina, her friend, having already broken the silence, gave Fatima the permission she needed. Her carefully constructed wall crumbled. Her shoulders slumped in defeat, and she let out a long, shuddering breath she seemed to have been holding for months. There is something, she said, her voice barely audible. She glanced nervously at the door. It's not safe. But it exists. What is it? He pressed, his heart quickening. A diary, she whispered. It's not one person's. We pass it around. When something happens we write it down. The date. The person. The reason. And we draw the mark. So we don't forget. So we know we aren't crazy. It's our proof. A collective journal of misery. A meticulous record of torture. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. It was the smoking gun. Where is it? It's hidden, Fatima said, a spark of defiance now in her eyes. She inspects our trunks, our lockers, everything. We are clever. It's in the library. In the spine of an old, forgotten book. A book on military history from 1950. No one has checked it out in 30 years. Brigadier Saif felt a surge of grim triumph. What is the title of the book? Fatima told him. The Legacy of Command. The irony was not lost on him. I need you to do something for me, Fatima. And it will require immense bravery, he said. I need you to retrieve it. I will create a diversion. At 1600 hours, I am scheduling a parade rehearsal on the main ground. It's mandatory. Captain will have to be there. The library will be empty. Get the diary and bring it to my adjutant, Major Iqbal. He will be waiting for you in a jeep behind the mess hall. He is my man. Can you do this? Fatima hesitated for only a second. The fear was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a new, steely resolve. She had a chance to end this nightmare. She looked at the brigadier, a man who had shown them more concern in one afternoon than they had received in years. She nodded. Yes, sir. I can. As Fatima left the room, Brigadier Saif felt the weight of responsibility sit heavily on his shoulders. He was setting a dangerous plan in motion. He was using his own soldiers to conduct a covert operation on a military base. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that it was the only way. He was no longer just an investigator. He was a commandant, leading his troops in a new kind of war. A war for the soul of. The air at 1,600 hours was thick with tension. The parade ground was a sea of perfectly aligned cadets, the sharp commands of Captain Zara echoing across the open space. She was in her element, her voice a whip, correcting postures, berating a cadet for a scuffed boot. She was completely focused, a predator scanning her herd, and aware that one of her flock had slipped away. Behind the noisy, organized chaos of the parade, the cantonment library was an oasis of silence. Fatima's heart hammered against her ribs. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. She moved quickly, her shoes making no sound on the polished linoleum. She found the history section, her fingers tracing the dusty spines of forgotten books. Her hands were sweating. The legacy of command. There it was. An old, thick, and assuming volume bound in dark green leather. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it from the shelf. It felt heavier than it should. She carried it to a secluded crelan. With a small penknife she had hidden in her pocket, she carefully slit the fabric along the inside of the spine. Her heart leaped as she saw it. Tucked inside the piece was a small, cheap notebook. Its pages were filled with neat, cramped handwriting from a dozen different hands. She stuffed the diary into the waistband of her trousers, pulling her tunic down to cover it. She the book and walked out of the library, forcing herself to maintain a calm, steady pace. Every step was an agony of suspense. She expected a hand to fall on her shoulder at any moment. But no one stopped her. She found the jeep exactly where the brigadier had said it would be, parked in the shadow of the large banyan tree behind the officers' mess. Major Iqbal, a man with kind eyes, was in the driver's seat. He didn't speak. He simply nodded as she approached. She pulled out the diary and handed it to him. He took it, placed it inside his briefcase, and locked it. "Well done, Sipo," he said softly. "Go back to your barracks now. Act normal." An hour later, the diary lay open on the desk in front of Brigadier Saif. It was a harrowing document. Page after page detailed the cold, systematic cruelty of Captain. October 12th. Neither are late for morning formation by 30 seconds. Reason, helping a sick roommate. Judgment, when mark, left forearm. Sympathy is a weakness we cannot afford. November 4th. K. A smudge on her rifle during inspection. Judgment, when mark, back of right hand. Your weapon is an extension of your soul. A dirty weapon means a dirty soul. December 21. Hina J. hesitated during a spoken drill. Judgment, when mark, back of right hand. Doubt is the enemy of action. I will burn it out of you. Each entry was accompanied by a small circle, a chilling testament to their shared trauma. It was a ledger of pain, a testament to a monster's ego masquerading as discipline. He closed the book. He had what he needed. The proof was undeniable, irrefutable, and utterly damning. He sent a message to Captain Zara. Report to the briefing room at 1,800 hours. We need to discuss the findings of my inspection. At precisely 1,800 hours, there was a sharp knock on the door. Captain entered, her expression a perfect blend of professional deference and impatience. "Sir," she said. "You wished to see me?" "Yes, Captain." "Please, have a seat," Brigadier Saif said, his voice level. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. The small diary lay on the desk between them. It looked insignificant, almost pathetic. Zara sat down, her eyes flicking to the notebook, a faint line of curiosity on her brow. "An interesting choice of reading material, sir." "It is," the brigadier agreed. "I've found it to be illuminating. It's called The Legacy of Command. A fitting title, don't you think?" He watched her for any reaction. There was none. Her face remained a mask of marble. He opened the diary to a random page. "Tell me, Captain. On October 12th, what was Sipo Riaz's infraction?" For the first time, a flicker of something disturbed the calm surface of her composure. A hint of surprise, quickly suppressed. "Sir, I cannot be expected to recall every minor disciplinary issue for every cadet." "Of course not," the brigadier said smoothly. He turned a few more pages. "How about Sipokan, November 4th?" A smudge on her rifle. He looked up at her, his gaze like a physical weight. Or perhaps went closer to home. "Sipo Hina Jabeen. December 21st. The sin of hesitation." The color drained slightly from Zara's face. The mask was still there, but he could see the frantic calculations happening behind her eyes. She was trying to understand how he could possibly know these details. "Sir, with all due respect," she began, her voice taking on a hard, defensive edge, "these are routine matters of military discipline. I am tasked with turning girls into soldiers. Sometimes, that requires a firm hand. This is a tough environment. I am creating officers who will not break under pressure." "A firm hand, Captain," the brigadier said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Is that what you call it?" He pushed the diary across the desk towards her. "This isn't a record of discipline. It's a catalog of assault. Of torture." Zara looked down at the diary, but didn't touch it. A cold, arrogant smile touched her lips. "That is a very serious accusation, Brigadier." "Based on what?" "The hysterical scribblings of a few emotional girls who can't handle the pressure. They are weak. I am making them strong. The world out there is a cruel and forgiving place. I am simply a more honest, more concentrated version of it. I burn away their weakness. I forge them into steel. You call it cruelty, I call it creation." Her confession was breathtaking in its arrogance. She wasn't denying it. She was justifying it. She truly believed in her own twisted philosophy. She saw herself as a sculptor, and their pen was her hammer and chisel. "You don't forge steel, Captain," the brigadier retorted, his voice cutting through her. "You create fractures. You create fear and resentment. An army built on fear will break at the first real test. Discipline is built on respect, not terror. It's about building a soldier up, not breaking a human being down. You haven't been creating soldiers. You have been gratifying your own sick, twisted ego at the expense of the young women this army entrusted to your care." He stood up, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "You have dishonored your uniform, Captain. You have dishonored your rank. And you have dishonored the memory of every soldier who ever fought and died under this flag with integrity." He picked up the diary, his thumb finding a specific page. Hina's entry. He read it aloud, his voice clear and damning. December 2160. Hina J. hesitated during a spoken drill. Judgment, Van Mark, back of right hand. She said doubt is the enemy of action. I will burn it out of you. He closed the book with a sharp snap. The sound echoed in the silent room. For one single, solitary second, Captain Zara's mask of marble finally cracked. It wasn't a look of remorse or guilt. It was a flash of pure and diluted fury. The fury of a god whose divine right to rule had been challenged by a mere mortal. And in that one second, Brigadier Saif saw the monster she had kept hidden so well. The climax was over. The judgment was about to begin. The fallout was swift and silent. Captain Zara was formally relieved of her command that very evening. She was placed under house arrest, pending a full. The base commandant, shaken and embarrassed, was ordered by GHQ to cooperate fully with Brigadier Saif's investigation. The official story was that Captain had been transferred on an urgent posting, a thin veil to prevent widespread panic and gossip, while the truth was carefully uncovered. But for the women of Block D, the change was immediate and profound. The air itself seemed to change. The next morning, the suffocating blanket of fear that had smothered the wing for so long had lifted. There was still discipline, of course. The routines were the same. But the undercurrent of terror was gone. You could hear it in the quiet chatter in the mess hall, see it in the way the cadets' shoulders a little less tense, their heads held a little higher. A week later, Brigadier Saif called a special assembly for all the cadets of the women's wing. They gathered in the main auditorium, the same room where Captain had so often delivered her chilling speeches. He stood on the stage, not behind the imposing podium, but in front of it, standing with them on the same level. I know the past few days have been filled with uncertainty, he began, his voice echoing in the large hall. He looked out at there, Fatima, Nida, and dozens of others. And I am not here to give you platitudes or excuses. I am here to say that the system failed you. An officer who was meant to be your guardian, your mentor, abused her power. And for that, on behalf of the leadership of this army, I am truly sorry. A murmur went through the crowd. An apology. It was unheard of. But while the system may have failed, he continued, his voice growing stronger, you did not fail. In the face of immense fear, some of you found a courage that is not taught on any obstacle course. The courage to whisper the truth. The courage to write it down. The courage to trust one another. That is the true meaning of camaraderie. That is the steel that cannot be artificially forged, but must be grown in the heart. He looked directly at Hina and Fatima, who were sitting together in the front row. True strength is not the absence of fear. It is the will to act in spite of it. And true honor is not about hiding our institutions' flaws. It is about having the integrity to face them, and the determination to fix them. You have reminded an old soldier of that lesson. You have made this uniform stronger, not weaker. He concluded, the era of the marble doll is over. A new chapter begins today. A chapter that you will write. Make it a good one. As he walked off the stage, the cadets rose to their feet. And for the first time in a very long time, the applause in that hall was not forced or rehearsed. It was genuine. It was a sound of release, of hope, of a future reclaim. Months passed. Brigadier Saif delayed his retirement, overseeing the reforms at. New, more empathetic officers were brought in. New policies on welfare checks and anonymous reporting were implemented, ensuring a tragedy like this could never happen again. Captain Zara was dishonorably discharged and faced criminal charges, her name erased from the proud history of the cantonment. The final scene we see is not of the brigadier, or of the. It's on the familiar training grounds of the academy. A new batch of cadets has just arrived, looking nervous and lost. Sipo Hina Jabeen, now a lance naik, a junior leader, is tasked with instructing them on rifle maintenance. She spots a young girl struggling, her hands clumsy, a look of frustration on her face. Hina walks over. The girl flinches, expecting a reprimand. Instead, Hina smiles, a warm, genuine smile. It's tricky at first, she says softly. Here, let me show you. She gently guides the young cadet's hands, her own hand, with its faint, silvery circular scar, moving with confidence and grace. The scar is still there. It will always be a part of her. But it is no longer a brand of shame. It is a reminder. A reminder of the darkness she survived and the light she helped to create. She is not just teaching the cadet how to clean a rifle. She is teaching her that here, in this place, she is safe. The cycle of fear has been broken. The soft, melancholic sarangi music returns, but this time it has a hopeful, uplifting tone. Narrator: a single scar, a hidden diary, and the courage of an old soldier to ask one more question. That's all it took to bring down a tyrant and save the souls of 100 women. The story of Hina Jabeen, Fatima Chaudhry, and Brigadier Saif is a powerful reminder. It teaches us that the most dangerous battles are often not fought against a foreign enemy but against the darkness that can grow within our own ranks, behind our own walls. It shows us that true honor isn't found in a flawless reputation but in the immense courage it takes to expose a painful truth and begin the hard work of healing. One voice, even a whisper, can become a roar when it speaks the truth. What part of this story moved you the most? Was it Hina's quiet bravery? The Brigadier's unwavering integrity? Or Captain's chilling philosophy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every voice matters in a conversation like this. And if you believe that stories of quiet courage need to be told, that the fight for justice in the shadows deserves to be brought into the light, then please support our channel. Subscribe, hit that notification bell and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching.